Welcome back to the Raw Christian Men's Podcast, where we tackle the topics that are most important to the Christian men. This episode, we are going to be talking about mentorship and leadership within the church. I am Brad Martin, and as usual, we have Luke Rude over there by the sound desk. We have three guests tonight. We have Austin Clem, we have Jerry McQuistion, and we have Jim Parsons. How you guys doing?
Excellent.
Doing good.
Doing great.
So tonight, I'm going to go ahead and talk about mentorship. I'm going to go ahead and say it now. Like when I say the church, I'm going to say the church a lot. I'm going to go ahead and I'm talking like very macro, broad, the Christian church, not necessarily, microscopic down to like Walton Christian, even though some of the ideas or some of the things I'm talking about might pertain to us. I'm going to say broadly the Christian church. So real quick, we'll go around the room, kind of, tell us about yourself a little bit. Austin, how you doing?
I'm pretty good. How are you?
I'm doing all right.
I'm Austin Clem. I've been involved with the church off and on throughout my life, up until I met my wife. I've really gotten involved in the last 3 or 4 years. So thank God for her and that opportunity. So that's where I'm at now.
And I mean, I don't want to offend, but you're young enough that the question shouldn't offend you. Like, how old are you?
I'm 30 years old.
So you're 30 years old. So you're right there at the cusp of, thinking about possibly getting into church leadership or.
Yeah, absolutely. And just trying to find the time where I'm ready. I feel like I'm ready and I can be a benefit to the church where I can devote the time that's needed and that I don't make God disappointed in my actions, if that would make sense.
Yeah, that makes sense. Jerry, how you doing?
I am great.
So
I'm Jerry McQuiston. I'm an elder here at Walton Christian Church. I've been here for over 40 years, an elder for over 30 years, and I enjoy this church and love this church.
Awesome. Thanks for being here. And Jim, how are you?
Doing great, thanks. Jim Parsons. I'm currently an elder at Walton Christian Church, was a deacon at Walton Christian Church, been here 25 years, about the last 7 as an elder.
Okay. So we have a range of, as far as, experience, age. Did you guys, I didn't even catch, did you guys happen to say your ages? I don't want to overstep.
No.
Do you want to say your age? You feel comfortable?
69 years old.
And I'm 57.
Okay. So yeah, we have, and I wouldn't even say that's like necessarily old within the church, because like we've talked about it before in other, classes and meetings. Like we have 6 generations actively like within a church right now.
We do. Yeah.
So
Our class is not the oldest,
yeah, that's,
by the way.
yes. So I wouldn't even say like, those ages are still right there. They're, I would say, healthy within the leadership range, especially within the church, and dealing with mentorship. And Luke, I mean, you're still a baby. So
I'm 21. I'm not that much.
So mentorship. We'll just dive right into it. When you hear, I'll just say mentorship within the church, how do you feel our present situation is? Because I know what I think. But.
Can I read something?
Yeah,
first,
go ahead.
if you don't mind.
No, go ahead.
It says Max Lucado was at an elegant dinner beside a man from Germany. To make conversation, Max asked the gentleman what he did for a living. The German responded, "I am a keeper of the forest." "Oh," probed Max, "and what does a keeper of the forest do?" Put simply, the gentleman responded, "I harvest the trees my father planted, and I plant the trees my sons will harvest. So I must always plant more trees than I harvest." And I think as mentors, that's what we're here to do, is plant trees and grow trees. And we always need to do more than what we started with.
And I completely agree with that. But how do you feel like as a whole, the church is doing as far as mentorship?
We're starting.
What's that?
We are starting.
We're starting.
So we haven't necessarily had mentorship a lot in the past, but in the last 2 years, we've actively started mentoring.
That's saying within Walton Christian.
Within Walton
Yes.
Christian. In the church in the United States, it's not real prevalent mentoring in most of the macro church. The types of things that have happened before, generations speak differently, generations listen differently, generations interact differently. And the older generation has been a very quiet generation, more of a watch what I do generation, not an active, let me talk to you about this, let me tell you about this. Because when they were growing up, nobody talked to them about their feelings. Nobody talked to them about what was going on. They just watched what was going on and mimicked it. So you got the 6 generations. You got these younger generations who've never known anything but an iPhone in their hand, who've had answers to anything they want, right, wrong, or indifferent, good, bad, whether it's true or not, right off their phone. And so if they have a question, they can ask. Luke's generation is the first generation to have that. Austin's generation kind of caught it in the middle of that. Mm-hmm. So they grew up starting without that, but then caught it maybe in middle school or high school. And so the need for that kind of interaction is, in my opinion, more in a younger generation because they're so connected on their phones that they don't connect in person. And so all the information they get doesn't necessarily translate. Whereas my generation, Jerry's generation, we hung out with our parents and followed them around and did stuff and learned by osmosis and learned by seeing and learned by doing. We didn't learn by asking. And that there's a difference. So it's hard to translate that into giving information to someone younger who doesn't need any information from you because they already get it from their phone.
Yeah.
I agree with Jim in the fact that, like I said, I've been here for over 40 years. And in the past few years, we've put more effort and emphasis into trying to grow younger and trying to grow for the future. I think in the past, it's just been, this is where we're at, this is what we're doing. We're not going to change things. We're just going to continue as it is. And in the past, we were often led by elders who were elderly. And I think that we're looking to change that as well right now. So I believe that we are looking more towards becoming more youthful and more towards our future than what we have in the past.
And I mean, I can see the changes that we're making, like on like a micro level at Walton Christian, as far as trying to incorporate more of the younger generations. We're doing that a lot more than what they were doing when I was starting to come here with my wife when I was 18, 19, 20. It was just like how you were describing, like there was the kind of the older generation, and it was how they wanted it, and that was how it was going to be.
That's what we did.
And that's exactly what we did. So are you seeing anything different being the younger generation? Are you guys seeing anything different compared to when you maybe first started coming here? Because, I mean, you guys, I mean, you haven't been coming here for years, I would say that, but you've been here long enough to be able to see changes, right?
Yeah, and I think first of all we see it just in the small things like the D groups, our Sunday schools, where Luke and Tristan now have complete authority over one group for the younger people. Or we had the split between the women's and the men's group was typically younger couples anyway, that were on the same topic, weren't in the same room, right? And it allowed us to get closer with you and with Jim. And then I was an ichthus for a little bit with Jerry, but it allowed us to kind of open up a little bit, and you see it where we're incorporating these new things in the church. Where I remember the first day that the brochures went away. That was a fun service, or afterwards, the next Sunday. But we're trying things like Jerry and Jim have been talking about, is moving towards the future, because I expect we can continue to go to this church for the next 60, 70 years, God willing. Right. So, and then pass it back down. And because at the end of the day, this isn't our church, it's God's church. And I think we're making the moves that we need to keep this church around and doing its purpose for what God's will is.
Luke, you're young, and you've become very involved in our church. And I just kind of like to hear your point of view on how the church is maybe or maybe even not growing more youthful or trying to involve the youth more.
I'd say it is because, as mentioned, my generation is more technologically advanced, where we rely on our phones, I'll admit, way too much. And if we put like stuff out there like more social media aspects, more technologically integrated things, it'll reach people in my generation and younger.
Okay.
I forgot the question.
That's all good. So I think where I kind of get hung up on is like, because I'm 39 years old, and I've been a deacon here for probably going on 7 years now, and not just when I started, but I still am like the youngest person, like I would say, considered like in a quote unquote leadership role, which how, and I know when I first started to be interested in it, like there really wasn't, I didn't have that person like that I could really seek out for guidance or how to necessarily go about becoming a deacon, or once I became a deacon, what I needed to do to, be effective in that role. It was kind of like, there you go, learn by trial, trial by fire. How do we fix that? Or do you think we're on the right path to fixing that? Because like I said, we're doing good about catering to more of the younger generation, but are we really like building up the next generation of leadership?
So I remember coming here as a kid, and when I heard the term there was an elder here, I didn't feel like I could talk to that person, that they were a board. It was not necessarily you, Jerry, but like even Bill, there was this not necessarily excessive sainthood, but it was more of a respect thing where it's, man, I don't know if I can really go talk to that person. I mean, I played football for some people in this church, but especially now with Jim and Jerry and the elders and Dave Raderstorff, I feel more open than ever, just like you guys invited Cassie and I to go to E2. That was a huge experience for us. We thought that it was very nice to be invited to that and just kind of see the other side of where this church was trying to move and where the elder group was trying to help keep this church moving in the right direction.
So before I came here, I went to a different church in Kokomo, and going off of what Austin said, when I seen the elders, I thought, okay, they're just like what they were called in my other church, ushers. And different to you, I felt more comfortable to just going and talking to them. And again, Jim, my uncle, was one of them, so made it even more comfortable.
When I was first on the board and became an elder, honestly, what the elders did was communion meditation and prayer during the Sunday services, and occasionally go out and visit with people who are shut in or in the hospital or take communion. We've expanded that role so much since then, and the elders have become so much more involved, as well as the deacons also. I think that we're seeing more involvement, and we're seeing more involvement through the whole church.
So from, I guess, an elder's perspective, I mean, I don't have the insight, I guess. Is there like a plan, or do you guys follow any kind of guidelines as far as who you're looking for to, like, are you guys looking to approach people about becoming leaders within the church, or are you waiting until somebody comes up to you? How do we go about that?
Well, we are always looking, maybe not always as hard as we should be, if someone would approach us, we would discuss it with them and then go through that procedure. Right now, the elders, we're going to be reviewing our elders questionnaire and our deacons questionnaire with the thought of expanding with more elders and more deacons in the future.
And to help answer your question, since you've been here and you've been on the board for 7 or 8 years, up until a couple of years ago, we were not intentional. We have become intentional. The difference is we looked and said, we need to make changes. How do we become intentional? And mentoring in general has to be intentional. You know, in different generations, when there wasn't the iPhone and there wasn't all the internet and everything, if you needed something fixed at your house, think about this. You didn't go to YouTube. You had someone come over. That was a mentoring opportunity that is no longer there. So you have to become intentional about mentoring. And when we picked people before, you looked around and said, okay, who's here? You know, who's involved in Sunday school? Who looks like they read the Bible? Who seems knowledgeable about the word and that kind of thing? Well, let's go ask them if they want to join the deacons or the elders. And a lot of times it was join the deacons and then you move up to the elders. That's not the way it has to be. That's just the way it was. So it took a change of thought process to say we want to be intentional to start changing the process by which we do that. We never did training before. We are almost to the end of our leadership training right now that's been going on for some 15 weeks or so. We never had a leadership training class before. So, again, intentional. So when you came, it was trial by fire, very much the way it was for the generation before that and the generation before that. And I don't want to harp on it, but I think the difference was there was much more interaction because there wasn't the internet and the iPhone and everything else to answer all those questions. You had to go to someone older with knowledge to get that passed down. And so if you think about that from an older person's perspective who didn't grow up with a phone in your hand, who knew how to use a dial telephone, you look at that and you say, wow, I wish they wanted to know more from me so I could be able to spend more time with them. But time is of the essence. Things move fast, and things aren't slow enough to give an older person necessarily the opportunity to spend time because we're not moving that fast, first of all. And we have a naturally more laid back look at life because we're not climbing the mountain. We're walking down the other side.
Okay. I guess that's always been my concern, like even before we really started to go into the more E2, that leadership and trying to change up how we do stuff within the church, attracting some of the younger congregation. But it was just because I think we've talked about it also, like where like when we get together and I kind of try to be deliberate and ask some of the younger people like, hey, if you were interested in becoming like a deacon, do you know the process? Like, and most of them have no idea. So I guess where my concern lies as far as mentorship is like, I think it's great that we are reaching out, trying to attract more of the younger generation to get them into the building. But as far as like leadership or the mentorship for the leaders, like, does it need to fall on the person needing the mentorship, or does it need to fall on the older generation to seek out a mentoree, I guess?
Well, the older generations should certainly seek out people, but the younger generation can also ask. It's a two-way street.
That's exactly what I was going to say.
It's not one-sided. It's a total two-way street. You've got to have willing participants to be able to mentor somebody. You can't just reach out and say, "Hey, I'm mentoring you. You better sit down and listen."
And I'm not necessarily saying like necessarily a forceful, but like there's a lot of people, especially there's a lot of younger of the younger generation. They're more, I guess I'm trying to think of the word I want to use. They're very standoffish, I
Yeah.
guess, and they might be intimidated to like approach like a deacon or an elder, like, hey, I really am interested in Trinity. What do I need to do, or who, you know.
Well, for one thing, along those lines, if you're a person who is looking for a mentor, you need to realize that person doesn't have to be perfect.
Yeah.
That person just has to have a strong spiritual background and has to be willing to be a mentor. It's like we said before, it's a two-way street. The person wanting to be mentored needs to be willing to be mentored and needs to be willing to seek that person. And the mentor needs to be willing to seek someone to mentor, and they also need to be willing to put the time into it. And the mentor and the mentoree both become so much closer after that because of the way they interact and deal with each other.
So I'm going to suggest that you start with prayer. I'll just go to the macro church in the United States or the world. You start with prayer. 9 months ago, I put 3 individuals and 2 couples on my mirror in my bathroom who I pray for every day. 2 of you gentlemen, who are the couples, are sitting here now speaking with me. So why is that important? Because we need to have mentoring. We need to grow the next generation.
Boston, the E2 conference from last year. This year, already, we have 22 attendees.
I think we had 10 to 12.
It was somewhere in there.
We had 14 the first year and I think 12 last year. So,
And we have 22 already this year,
yeah.
which I think they said the big group last year was 30.
Was it?
So we still got a few more to go, but I think that is awesome to see that involvement and that desire from people wanting to grow.
And the thing that you said, Jerry, was that find somebody that's not perfect. And that's the thing that I see now, and that you guys are doing, whether it's you or Jim or Coach Mannering or whoever, the elders of the church, breaking down and saying that you're not perfect, right? Because, people you look up to and you have this situation, it's like, man, I can't live up to that. And then it's, wait, they're human too. That makes a huge difference for me, right? But that's just my thought about that.
Eat it.
Right.
So I think it goes both ways. Like everybody has the capacity to be a mentor, but not everybody should be a man. Everybody has the capacity to be a leader, but not everybody should be within leadership. So from a leadership standpoint, if you are looking to possibly approach somebody about coming into a leadership role or like seeing if they're interested, what are the traits or attributes that you guys are looking for? And then what should somebody who of the younger generation look for in a possible mentor?
Well, I think the spiritual depth that person has, because you have to have a certain amount of spiritual depth in order to be a leader. You can't just take someone who's newly Christian and put them into a leadership position. They're just not ready for that yet. So that's one thing. You need to have someone who's had some experience in that. You also need to have someone who is desiring to be a leader and who is desiring to grow in their faith and to grow in their walk with God. And I think once you see those things, then you can bring that person along. But I think those are probably the most important items to start out with.
And we have an elder questionnaire and a deacon questionnaire. It comes right out of the Bible. Deacons are men of God, led by them toward the Christian life. They're well-spoken. They're in the Word. And you can tell if someone's in the Word or they're not. They tend to use more biblical phrases, more biblical concepts when they talk, and they're more apt to talk about their prayer life or the things that they do to forward that. You look in the church in general and you see people who sit in the pews on Sunday And that's all they do. They come in, they get fed, and they leave. It's a buffet, which is fine. That's good. I'm glad they're here. But you also see the people who are asking questions, or who are in a Sunday school or a D group, who are participating, saying, hey, I want a little bit more. I need a little bit more. I want to be a better disciple. So you're looking, go and make disciples. That's what the Great Commandment is. You're looking for people who want to be disciples. So in Jesus' time, he says, come follow me, and they follow, right? So John the Baptist has got his disciples. Jesus comes along, has his disciples. In our time, we don't talk that way. We don't have a 3-year program where you follow me around for 3 years of my life and become my disciple. That's not the way we do things. But there's still that discipleship piece, mentorship piece, I think we would call it today. And you're just disciples making disciples. And if you see someone who has that interest and you approach, and then they start to follow, then you can build on that. You can work that with mentorship. You can work that with leadership. You can work that with just becoming a better Christian. But it's a two-way street. It has to be both the desire on both parts.
I'd also just like to say there is no hierarchy of importance in the church. An elder is no more important than a deacon. A deacon is no more important than the janitor of the church. Everyone, it takes all. We're a body. It states in the Bible that you can't live without one arm and have the other. You lose something in the process. So we are all together as a body. So there's no one who is more critical or more important to the church. Each and every one of us are. The praise team, they're extremely important. The pianist, the drummer, people running the sound machines, everyone has their job and has their ability. The people that greet, Jenny that sends cards out all the time, everyone has a job to do and a position in the church, and each are equally important.
'Cause I think that's something like when I was just starting to get interested in possibly being a leader within the church, you kind of have that feeling that there is that hierarchy. And as a younger generation, is that still a feeling that you guys have? Is that there's like that hierarchy, like you have deacons and you have elders?
Yeah, and I think, and it's an age thing too for me still. Not necessarily as a deacon, but as an elder, in my opinion, if I want my church ran, I want my church ran by people that have been here a long time, that know what it's going to do to succeed. And with the last 2 years, that experience that they've brought in, that you guys have brought in, has shown that it was like, well, we got to do something, and we got to do something quick. And I'm not saying that we can have some wonder kid that could be, an elder, then that's fine. But yeah, I would say so. It's a hierarchy. It's almost like your spiritual path in my way, right? Where it's take one step at a time, and you get to this point when you're ready, and then you go from there.
So, sorry, go ahead.
That's going to be the same thing.
Okay. So from the younger perspective, is there anything that you kind of see that's going on still that, I don't know, makes you a little bit apprehensive or still kind of confusing about if you were interested in being a leader? Like how you would go about the steps?
Yeah, and my biggest thing for me now is my work life, and trying to balance that with my home life as long as my church life. I'm still not very good at that at this point. I've been trying to help lead a Bible study every Wednesday, and work's taken 6 of those days away. Luckily, I was able to go last night, but trying to find that balance and trying to do what I have to do, and rely more on God to kind of handle those things instead of me trying to take care of it. But
Good.
I think what Austin was just saying there, trying to find the time. And I think that's also probably one of the reasons why you don't always see that much involvement from people of Austin's age. You've got kids, you've got events to go to, sporting events, school events. You've got work to take care of. You're so involved in so many things. It's hard to find the time to put to use like that. Whereas I'm retired. I can kind of set my schedule. I actually found out I'm more involved than what I used to be in a lot of different things. And my schedule's actually busier, I think, than what it used to be. But it's things that we want to spend the time in.
So you don't see yourselves as leaders maybe, but the elders already see you as leaders.
Oh, yeah.
So Bill's already talked about you, Austin, doing a great job with this class that you're leading. And
Luke, you and Tristan. Oh, my gosh. That's amazing.
And we discuss that in our elder meetings about the direction things are going and who's doing what. And Brad, you're leading classes and you're co-leading and you're doing things and you're leading a young men's group.
Soon to be the #1 podcast in the United States.
Yeah.
I think we have some
And
ways to go for that.
you've started this 5 years ago. I don't think anybody here ever imagined
Oh, no.
this. None of us. So 5 years ago, when you looked around, I was one of the youngest guys here. There was a few family members of other family members who were a little younger. You were probably the youngest guy here when I looked around 5 years ago. But relatively speaking, right? You're the daughter and son-in-law of a
the older or some of the
two older
Yeah.
multiple older generations
Yeah.
who are already here, right? So 5 years ago we wouldn't have looked at this. So you guys come in and you go, "Hey, I think we need this." Great, that's awesome. That's leadership. You stepped up and you put this together. That's leadership. You show up and you lead a class. That's leadership.
And I was going to say the same thing, like for you guys, like don't belittle what you are participating, what you're bringing, because you are stepping up and you're leading a church or you're leading a class and you're leading a Sunday or a Bible study. I mean, that's actually as big. I mean, trying to get some of the younger generation to, help out, let alone step up and lead like that. It's hard.
And you guys are leading classes now who were uninvolved 2 or 3 years ago. They had no place. So
And Luke's doing the soundboard on Sundays, and Brad's doing the online video feeds, and you guys are doing all these things that, we first started with COVID because we had to. But if you recall, we had a camera on a tripod sitting in the front pew, hooked with a 50-foot cord back to a recording device, and we're somehow getting that out on the internet. To now we have a full setup with.
we had names written on the
Oh yes,
seats too.
and we have a full setup now of real equipment that you guys are running. I wouldn't know how to run any of this stuff. That's why we didn't have it before.
So kind of to piggyback off that, so I appreciate the comments, by the way, but good leaders know that their own limitations.
Yeah.
So you guys have opened this up to where it's like, hold on a second. Not only can we kill, you guys saw what could possibly happen. You made it available for it to happen. You could have just stuck with the same old thing and just kept going, right? But you guys are the ones that actually made it, and that's the mentorship that was needed was, we trust you. You got this. Go ahead and go.
So I was gonna say what put me into that position where I was like, I'll do sound, teach this class was taking the original class that we took earlier in the year. Taking that kind of got me more comfortable within the church, to where I was like, okay, yeah, I can help lead it.
That's great.
And Luke, you're in our leadership class.
Yep.
And that was all intentional. That was all by invitation.
At 21. So it's
21 years old.
Yeah.
And that's something I would give, or some advice I would give, not just to you guys, like whoever might be listening. Like, if somebody's approaching you and asking you, like, hey, would you be interested in possibly leading this Sunday school class or doing this Bible study or this, that, and the other? I mean, you might be very apprehensive about it, but they're approaching you for a reason. Like, because somebody is seeing something in you that you might not necessarily see yourself. Those leadership qualities. I would highly suggest that, even though you might feel apprehensive about it or you might feel uncomfortable about it, go out on a limb, take that leap of faith and just see it might not work out. I mean, you're going to fail, You're not going to succeed at everything you do the first time you try it. But you learn from it.
I will say, if you're unsure about it, pray about it. That's helped me figure out if I was fit enough to lead this class, and that worked out.
Luke, I remember asking you to pray. And you came up to me the next Sunday and said, "You caught me off guard. I was not ready. But thank you."
And you're not going to be perfect out of the gate. None of us is perfect today. So if you're leading a class, there's going to be questions you can't answer. I get questions all the time I can't answer. Makes me work harder at learning more because someone has a question I never thought of. Well, whether you're leading your first class or your 50th class, that's going to happen. There's always somebody who's going to have a different thought or point of view. You don't have to know it all. And you just have to do and be. 80% is showing up. You think about all the times you come to your class and there's 12 people in the class and this week only 3 show up. You still show up because those 3 people needed it. And the people who couldn't be there for a reason. And they'll be back next week. And then the next week after that, you got all 12 there and you're like, wow, this is great. All 12 are here. And then it just bounces in between. And, sometimes you have people who participate. Sometimes you don't. And what your objective is to try to help them learn, help them be available and open. And if they don't participate, at least know that they're listening and they walked away with something they didn't have before they came.
So I'll admit, when I took our class, I was the person who just sat there and listened. I really didn't feel comfortable saying stuff. Then again, my dad was also in the class. But whenever he was gone, I felt more comfortable to talk.
And to piggyback off that, I felt the same way. I mean, I'm 39 years old when I was going to the Ichthus class. I mean, how often was I really chiming in and participating? It wasn't often at all. But I was in a class with, my wife and my mother-in-law and my father-in-law, and no offense, a lot of older, everybody else in that class other than Austin and Cassie. But technically everybody in that class other than Austin and Cassie were old enough to be my parents. So that it can be very uncomfortable. It can be very intimidating, but I looking back, I should have participated more because it wouldn't have hurt anything. It just made me grow.
With you guys in that class, and I'll say this for you guys and Austin and Cassie and so forth, you brought something new and something different to our class. You brought some different points of view. And when you did say something, it was critical to what we were talking about, and it led us into deeper thinking about it. And it just helped us to broaden and expand what we were looking at.
So I think it'd be a good time to shift gears a little bit because I don't think that mentorship ends at leadership roles. I think it definitely has to apply to just the Christian faith in general. So I'd like to just kind of shift gears and get your guys' perspective on finding that mentor that you can kind of follow and learn the ropes as you are developing as a Christian and becoming more mature in your faith. So,
well, to kind of go along with what you said, we're talking about mentoring here in the church and mentoring in our Christian life. You can mentor in your workplace. You can mentor in the community, and you can mentor in your family. Every dad is a mentor, and you can find someone in your place of business to mentor to. And it can be just a simple getting together and just saying, here, you might think about this, you might think about that.
One of the quote that I really stuck with me was never accept criticism from somebody you wouldn't take advice from. So I think that's the biggest thing, having somebody that when your back's against the wall, you're in your corner and you have nowhere else to go. Who's that person? And everybody's got one, whether they want to admit it or not. But like Jerry said, that could be at work, it could be at church, wherever. But just getting to that point where you know who your person is, and knowing and trusting what they have to say.
One thing I will add, a mentor is not always older than the mentoree. You
Yes.
can have, like, especially in a workplace, you're going to have people that are younger or older than you. That's still an opportunity you can have to mentor them to get them into the church.
Good point.
Yeah. I had a thought. Let me gather it again.
You're getting older, Brad.
It happens more and more every day.
You
What I
asked
got to look forward to?
Don't get older. It's overrated.
you asked about mentoring not stopping with leadership. Mentoring is for life. Disciples who make disciples.
Who make disciples, who make disciples.
Yeah. And every Christian is growing their whole life, because if you're not, you're going backwards, and you have to be growing your whole life. And so it's a goal to get better and better and better and better the older you get. And so you have to, in mentoring, you want to look at you don't have to, you want to look at helping people understand that you can overcome the obstacles, you can overcome the mistakes. If you looked at my life when I was your age, I made plenty of mistakes. I still make mistakes today, hopefully less than I did when I was 20 and 30. But you don't have to be perfect, and it's okay. And look through the front windshield, not out the rearview mirror.
Now, where I think we as a church, and I say church as the macro view, Christian church, where I think we kind of fall short is, we do focus on, bringing people to Christ and trying to make disciples. But I think too often when somebody does, come over, they commit their life to Christ and they've become a believer, we kind of stop right there. And like, oh yeah, we mission complete. They're over on our side now.
Yeah.
Who's next? And that's when they need that mentorship the most. I mean, would you guys agree with that?
Oh, definitely, yeah.
I want to say that kind of adds to the quote Jerry mentioned at the start of it, I don't know, what would you call it? The
Passage.
Keeper of the forest.
Keeper
keeper of the forest one. My job is to plant more trees that my father did, and hopefully my son will plant more trees than I did. It's kind of the same thing with people. Make more disciples than those before you have, and hopefully those who you make disciples will make more disciples than you did.
And I completely agree, but I think we need to, too often we stop. Once we get that person over, we don't help develop them.
Once the seed's planted in the soil, it still needs water and care.
Yeah.
It can't just grow on its own.
So let me turn the tables and ask you guys, what does a good mentor look like?
For me, it would be somebody that I trust, that I know is not is real. I'd much rather tell me somebody give me all the criticism in the world that was true than to just pat me on the back and say everything's going to be okay. So if I see that you're real and I trust you, that's what a mentor is to me. Somebody I'm willing to take advice from, because I know that what I'm going to be asking is probably going to be exactly what I need.
And I think it's a tough question, because I completely agree with Austin. The main attribute that I need to focus on, I need to be able to trust that person. But what am I looking for to ingrain that trust?
Trust takes time.
It does.
Yeah.
It takes time and effort, and it takes getting together and doing things. And with everybody's lives so busy, you'll find the reason I asked you the question, and Jerry mentioned it before, you'll find that younger people are just way more busy than older people, and older people just have more time to get together and sit around and chat and have a cup of coffee, or do something casual that doesn't.
That's why the old guys are always at the breakfast house in the morning having coffee.
Yeah, yeah. So it's hard to build that trust if you don't have the time. So you got to have the time on both sides.
So
It's a commitment both ways. It definitely is a commitment, because if you're going to make it work and you've got a plan of how to go about it, it can be as simple as just getting together once in a while, or just talking to each other on the phone, or just texting saying how you doing and what's going on. Or it can be structured and it's a weekly thing or a monthly thing where you're meeting this time each month, whatever. There's no actual set way that it needs to be. So but it needs to be continuous.
So, and I completely agree with everything you just said. Now, does that need to be more when you're meeting with somebody? Are you talking about more one-on-one? Are you talking about as a group and then trying to develop that trust and then kind of filtering down to maybe that one person to possibly be your mentor? Like, because if you're just trying to focus one-on-one with somebody and like say me and you, like we're taking the time, we're going once a month or once a week, and we're gonna have breakfast on a Saturday. Mm-hmm. Okay. Are you just doing that for a while, trying to develop that trust with one person? Then what if you find out that it's not a good fit, and then you turn around and are you starting over with somebody else, or are you talking about, hey, do we need to start a group? And I said maybe like on that Saturday we're going to have breakfast at the church. All are welcome, and then kind of mingle and kind of like maybe find somebody you kind of click with. Or I guess how would you want to go about it?
Either way. I mean, honestly, either way is a good way to mentor. One-on-one, you've got that closeness and you've got that fact where you're praying for each other and you're praying for each other's families and you're getting to know each other more closely. We also had the leadership class, which I believe that was a mentoring type of class. Would you think so, Luke?
Yes.
And that was with more people, but we also had a lot of open discussion during those classes. And it was discussion from everyone participated in it. And I think we all got to know each other better that way also. So it can be done either way.
And for me, I can look around and I can ask someone to do something to get together, and they're busy. And after the third time I've asked them and they're still busy, I'm moving on, because they've inadvertently told me, whether they wanted to or not, and they probably wanted to, but in a nice way, tell me they're not interested. Instead of hurting my feelings, they just say, I'm busy. So I'll get the clue and move on. But if I say, hey, let's do something, and I get together with someone, then that's the start, and then take it from there. It can grow into something, or it can fall away because it's not a good match. How do you know that until you try?
Yeah.
And spend that time.
So my question to you guys then, as elders, not necessarily from a leadership standpoint, but from more of a religious, biblical standpoint, are you continuously looking for possible mentorees, or is it just something like when the opportunity arises, you kind of you notice it and then you try to take advantage of it?
I'm looking regularly.
I haven't looked as much or as often as I could have, but I've also kind of waited for the opportunities. But I definitely feel like that's something that I should put myself more out to do.
Okay.
So for me, from the local church, from Walton Christian Church, I'm married into the generation above me. Okay, I'm at the oldest end of the X generation, and I married into the boomer generation. So I hang out with mostly boomers, and I'm happy to do that. That's where my place is. But I'm the youngest of that group, and so as they get older or are no longer with us physically, then I'm worried that this church isn't going to be here much longer. I am actively looking to see who I can connect with younger than me, 20, 30 years younger than me, that I can make sure that this church continues on, because the generation when you're the youngest of a group and you see everybody this much older than you, and you're like, oh my word, if you're the youngest, there's nobody behind you, it's going to die out. So I am actively doing that. Even though we just started intentionally doing that a couple years ago, it needs to continue to be intentional for the next 20 years. Forever, yeah, really.
And
we sat down as elders a few different times and have talked about this and talked about, where do we see our church at? in 10, 15 years. And when we first started talking about it, our discussion came up to the point, if we don't do something, and if we don't do something now, we may not have a church. I mean, seriously, we just may not have a church because we were not getting younger and we were staying older, and those people were moving on, and we didn't have anyone to fill the void.
And I personally think that we're taking the right steps, or at least we're going in the right direction as far as trying to attract some of the younger generation and some of the younger families. Because far too often, I mean, we'd get like a family visiting, and they might be here for a couple of weeks, and then you just notice that they stopped showing up because we weren't catering to the needs that they needed. So I guess, how do we be more deliberate about, going after the younger ones? Like Jimmy, you were talking about, you're worried about the church dying off. How do we, especially with the younger generation being as busy as we are, how do you go approach that as far as like getting people involved?
Well, you guys are very good at saying what you want. So we're asking, what do you want? So we have a coffee bar now in the back foyer. And I was asked about that coffee bar a bunch. Why would we have that coffee bar when we have coffee right here for our Sunday school hour? And the answer was because the people who don't come to Sunday school, that coffee's already gone when they get here. Mm-hmm. And for the people who come 10 minutes before church, we want it for them. Who are those people? Look around. Usually people with young children who are still trying to get the kids out of bed and get them dressed and get them in a car and get them loaded to get here in time for church, and they're rushing in at the last minute. So what didn't they do at home? They didn't get their coffee. So great, let's put coffee in. Now there's lots of people, young, old, everybody in between, drinking coffee off of that coffee bar and really like it. But we had to overcome a hurdle to have that coffee bar. I wouldn't have thought about that coffee bar. Where did that come from? That came from someone who wanted to start it and said, why don't we have one here? I used to have that at my church wherever, and it would be great if we have that here. So just continue to ask, what do you want?
So the one big battle we have here in the middle of Walton, Indiana, population of less of 1,000 people, is the macro of the church, where we are very, the word is the word, and that's what we go off of, right? Where some churches are not, I'm not saying not necessarily going off the word, but it's more of an event than it is actually being there, being present, and doing that, where you have illustrious light shows and everything else. It makes for great worship, which is fantastic. But we are at a spot where we, as our generation, might have to move in a direction where we get to that point, more of that point, or but we're doing the steps now on the front end. And if you take care of stuff on the front end, it usually comes out okay on the back end. So even though these seem like big things to a lot of people here, these are very small, minute things that eventually are going to snowball into the future of this church.
We've actually talked about in our elders meeting a few times about the format of our services, and the fact that in a lot of the younger churches, you have bands that are playing, you have drums, you have guitars, it's a presentation, and you have a light show and so forth. In Jared's church in Valparaiso and Jesse's church in San Carlos, both of them have elaborate music and praise times. And people get up and stand and they worship that way. Now, along with that, you come to the point to where, are you doing things just to bring people in, mm-hmm. and then you're not reaching them?
For sure.
Are you doing it just to be social and have people come in and enjoy the environment? Or are you doing it to bring people in, to bring them to know Jesus? And Brad, you mentioned a while ago something about how to get younger people involved. One of the biggest things is, if a young couple or a new couple come into church, they need to be greeted. They need to be talked to. Because if you come into a church and you just sit there in a pew and no one says anything to you, you're not going to feel very welcome. But if people talk to you and say, "Hi, I'm Jerry, and how are you?" And, are you from around here? And that type of thing, they feel much more welcome, and they're much more likely to come back the next week.
Yeah. And I think there's a fine line there too. Like, people want to feel welcomed, but they don't want to be put on the spot.
Right.
And I've been to churches when I was in the military where, like, I'd go and they find out that it's your first time there. Oh, they want you to stand up. They want you to introduce yourselves. They want their whole backstory. I'm like, I don't know you guys from Adam. Why? I don't want to share all this stuff. I'm technically just trying this church out. Don't put me on the spot. But then I've also been in churches where, like, you show up and nobody even notices you're there, and you're just, okay, well, do they really even care about the congregation, or do they care about the people walking through the door? So I think we do a pretty good job here at Walton as far as, like, there are times we can do better, but I feel overall, I think we do a job about greeting people that we don't recognize, but without kind of putting them on the spot. So,
and another thing I would say is I would like to think, and when we sing our first worship song and then we go meet and greet everybody, if you watch, it's not young people greeting young people. It's typically people greeting people in different generations, or that's my pew buddy that was across the side, or, and if I came into a church and I saw that they were interacting that way, I would feel very comfortable, I would think, in my personal opinion. And I guarantee you this, within the last 2 years, that church has definitely gotten some younger in it. Our church has. I'm just looking around, which is great. But we also don't want to forget about the people that have made this place home for 50, 60 years also, right? I mean, it's still their place. But at the same time, I'll probably be one of those grumpy guys when I'm 80. Well, why do we have a laser beam show? But
So you talked about baby steps and small steps, and part of having that music in a congregation is having people who can do it. Mm-hmm. And so we've had Derek Landis up there playing his guitar and playing the drums as well. If you would have been here before the drums came in and the shake-up that it made when the drums came in, you would understand how difficult that bridge was to cross. It would be that and more to try and put in a light show or something more than that. However, that being said, we're having the youth lead the service coming up, and they're going to do the music and everything. And we're trying to incorporate that more, so the elders talk about that. When are the youth going to be doing the service? How often can we have the youth do the service so that they can incorporate the songs that they want, the style of music that they want? But when you've got 6 generations, you got to have a balance. And for those people who fought to get things moving forward, and you expend all this energy to come up over the hill, and you get that one thing done, and you're like, oh, thank you. And then you coast back down. And from the younger perspective, you're going, but there's 10 more things behind that. We got to go, got to go. And we're going, yeah, but I just got that one done.
So
we lost, not many, but we did lose a few when we put the drums on the stage.
Really?
Yeah. I mean, it was a huge thing. Now, I honestly believe that we have more accepting people of that generation now than we've had ever in the past, and more people who are of that generation who are looking for us to become younger.
So on top of that, then how do we go about getting everybody to buy in, though? Because we do need to do a better job of catering to younger generations so we can keep the church growing and going long after the older generation leaves. I think like I said before, I think we're going in the right direction, but how do we get everybody to buy in?
The younger generation has to make suggestions. I mean, you've got people who think if it ain't broke, don't fix it. I like it the way it is here. Why would I change anything? How would they know that you don't like it? How would they know that you want something different if you don't come and say something? The younger generation is going to have to step up and say, what about this and this and this and this and this, and give us things to think about, and then not be disappointed if you gave us 10 ideas and we only implemented 2. Mm-hmm. You got to realize we can't do it all at once. But
that's what you said earlier about taking steps. And one of the things to get people to buy in more is we've got this 3-year plan. We still have things out there that are on the plan that we haven't done yet. So we need to introduce things, introduce the coffee bar, then go to the next thing, and not just throw everything out at once.
And I think, I'm going to speak for some of the younger generation here, but I think what we're worried about is that when we do try to bring up these ideas, because I think it's happening more and more that we're suggesting stuff. And I don't think that a majority of the congregation is necessarily against it. Maybe they need to be kind of explained to, the reasoning behind it. They might not, come from a different angle, but I think what we're worried about is that there's that loud minority of the older generation who is just completely against it, and that we're going to cater and placate to that minority, that just because we don't want to upset anybody. I think that's where we're kind of concerned about as we start to try to grow younger.
And this is a conversation I had with you two. I'm not going to bring about what it was about, but I'm not sure if you remember when I said, whose voice is the one that's going to be heard about this decision?
When I think we were talking about the associate pastor,
yes.
Right? Okay.
Whose voice is going to be heard here? Because that person's going to be here when I'm still here, right? And that just goes right in hand with you, and obviously you guys calmed it out and explained what it was going to be and everything else. But yeah, for sure, that's a huge thing where we know our place right now, but at the same time, it's like the rain's got to get taken over at some point.
So in that regard, you have to be able to fight for what you want. If you don't think people didn't fight for what they wanted before to get drums in here or get the music changed, you don't know what happened. They had to fight for what they want, and they had to take the criticism, and they had to listen to the people say, why are we doing this? So the thing about that is you can't just bring it up once and say, well, nobody listened to me. And then the other thing is you have to realize that the elders don't listen to one cranky old person. We hear it, but we take the good of the whole into consideration as we make decisions. So we already knew there would be resistance to the associate pastor. We already knew there was a lot of resistance to it. But we also knew that it's part of our plan, that it's been talked about in a plan, that this plan's been going on for a year now, and that we've put together a plan, and we vetted the plan through lots of people in the congregation. And this is where the plan's going. So if the good of the whole is the plan to bring the associate pastor in, then we bring the associate pastor in, and then we have to talk to the people who are against it and explain why we're doing it, what the good of it is, and why we're moving forward even though they dislike it. But you can't just alienate everybody and shove them out the door. You got to respect your elders.
I think it spoke volumes when it was announced that they were going to be here in the end of January, and applause went up. I think that's what we needed to hear. Along with the fact of Brad, you mentioned it about wanting to have things happen and having people resist it and so forth. I honestly feel right now we have less resistance from the generation that we've always had resistance from. But I honestly feel that we need to be very conscious and put forth an effort to involve them in any of our plans and any of our discussions and any decisions that we make. They want to feel it. They don't want to just feel pushed out.
Right.
And that's where some of that tension can come from. So we need to be involving them more, and we need to be more active in discussing things with them.
And a lot of times it comes down to communication. Somebody heard something or didn't hear something that ended up causing them to have an opinion that might have been against something that once they found out what it really was, that changed their mind.
We see that every day, right?
Oh, has that happened?
I don't think that ever happened here. So,
Yeah, from my point of view, we're working at it. When you look at the different generations have to step up and work at it from their point of view, because a lot of people don't know that there's a different point of view if they don't hear about it. And if it's only talked about it over here on the side in a small group and never talked about it over here with a larger audience, then that's where the miscommunication comes in.
But getting back to the positives of this, when was the last time that we've seen new groups, new classes come up that are being taught by 21, 22-year-old?
I've been here since, I'd say technically since I'm 18, and I don't think I've ever seen that.
Yeah.
Like even for the youth group, like the high school age youth group.
Yeah.
They've always had like an adult up there teaching the class. It was never really, trying to.
Or the youth pastor.
Yeah, it's.
And I'm sure your discussions in your class are a lot different with you and Tristan being the leaders than they would be with any of us being the leaders.
Yes, they are.
Yeah.
We did the same book that I took with Jim and Brad's class. Our discussions are completely different. We didn't go off on tangents like we did with Aaron, but still.
Well, and that's the thing. That's the cool thing about that is the age gap between where we were and where they're at is not a huge difference. It's not this huge thing. So just like you guys were saying, you guys are battling these insets of generations, but there's insets inside of the generations, right? Where you've got to go, oh, well, hold on, stop. Like you're on the high end, and then you're in the very low end where it's like, okay, whoop, stop. And then now we got to back it up a little bit and punt. And okay, let's try to make this happen.
And I think the cool thing about, because the class we're referred to as the real life theology class, the first class, even like for the men and the women's class, it was a pretty wide range, I would say, as far as age. It was like, I wouldn't say we had like a bunch of really old people, but we had some moving on in their years, and we all the way down to, I think you and Tristan were the youngest ones in the first class, which, early 20s. So having that wide of a range, it definitely fostered some interesting conversations. But I think it could also hold back because, like you were saying earlier, there's stuff that you don't necessarily want to talk about because your dad was in that same class. Yeah. And there was stuff that I didn't want to talk about in the Ichthus class because my in-laws were there. And it's not necessarily anything bad. It's not necessarily something that you talk about with, that close of a relative. So I think you guys stepping up and actually, teaching a class with your peers, that's going to help foster a better, trusting relationship. You're going to have conversations that you normally wouldn't have in any other Sunday school class.
And all that came out of our growth plan.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
That was defined in our growth plan. It was defined to ask people who were not in a D group yet to come to that group. It was mentioned that we don't have any separate men's only and women's only. We killed two birds with one stone. We're going to start this new real life theology, and we're going to make it men's and women, and we're going to ask people who don't normally come. And, oh, by the way, we need to have a young adults class. And out of the first class come Tristan and Luke, and there's our young adult class. Mm-hmm.
So, and I think this is just a pretty important point, or topic that we want to touch on really quick because I know we're running long. All this good stuff that comes out of these classes or these groups, I guess, and that the mentoring ties into this, getting people into those groups. Like, you don't want to push them, and you don't want to badger them to the point where you just turn them off.
I twisted Trista's arm.
There's some people that you can.
I think it was a little.
There's some people that you can twist their arms. There's others that you just mention it once or twice, and you say, "Sure, would like you to be in this class or whatever."
Or you do the smart thing and just go to their wife and say, "Hey."
So like, but your twisting of his arm was more for teaching of the class rather than to attending, right?
Yeah, but he walked into it. He said, I used to lead a class in high school. And then in another class, he said, I'm just waiting for God to tell me what my next step is. So he walked right into those.
Yeah. So I guess more what I would like to know you guys' input on is more of not necessarily leading of the classes, but getting people, especially those who might be on the fence or newly converted, getting them in so they can grow, so we can foster that growth.
Personal invitation. It is a one-on-one personal invitation. Sometimes that invitation's 3 or 4 times.
And you have to realize it may be 3 or 4 times and it may never come to fruition. Mm-hmm. I mean, you have to realize that sometimes it's just not going to happen, but the next person, it may happen.
Now, are you just, sorry.
No, you're good.
Are you just inviting, or are you trying to maybe not necessarily step into that mentorship role, but like kind of explain to them like, hey, you are younger, you're more, I don't say immature in your faith because it might sound negative, but like they are immature in their faith. Do you explain the importance behind why it would be good for them to be there? Or are you just saying, hey, I think it'd be a good idea for you to, or I think you might enjoy this? Or
Well, for me, it's I think you might enjoy this, and I think it'd be good for you. I think you'd get a lot out of it. It'd be something that you would really come away going, I'm really glad I did this.
And I think that's as far as you need to take it.
Yeah.
I mean, once you've said that and it's sparked some interest in them, mm-hmm. Now you go back and you say, I'd still like to have you come to that class and just keep it up for a little while. But then if it doesn't come to work out, it doesn't. But I don't think that you necessarily need to do more than the invitation. Now, if there's someone that you're wanting to move into a different position, or someone who's already attending a group or a class that you would like to see move up to do something else, that's when I think you intentionally talk to them about stepping into that role.
Yeah, just kind of to piggyback off that, we're kind of full circle where one, we talked about the language of what a Sunday school is and trying to adjust that to people that may or have no knowledge of what you hear school, you hear class, you hear study, you hear this. But another thing is, the thing that will make it attractive is the people that come to you that you feel are real, that you will willing to take advice from, where it's like, you know what, I think I do need to do this. Just give it a shot. See what happens. Okay. And then
2 weeks before those real life theology classes started, we had a commitment of maybe 5 ladies and 2 men. Mm-hmm. We ended up with 12 and 14. Mm-hmm. 2 weeks before, that's all we had. So from a leadership point of view, it's hard to get something going if people aren't willing to participate. So you hope everybody's willing to participate. So I lead on the side of I'll help it along. So I just took a book to the people who said they were interested, and I handed it to them and said, here's your book, and the class starts in 2 weeks. And that increased the people's commitment, because now they got a book. They're like, oh, my. Oh, I'm committed now.
Yeah, I need to go.
So, well, I think we've beat this horse pretty good. So,
so keep speaking up, keep making your suggestions, keep coming to things, keep asking, because we have no idea what else you want or need.
Plant more trees.
Yeah. So, it's good.
I will say a good mentor also creates more mentors, and that keeps going. Mm-hmm.
So I like to try to end the episodes like getting your guys' input, like especially with being mentorship and like seeking out mentors or seeking out mentorees. For those that might be listening, if you could just, one piece of advice that you would like to leave them with, do you have any grains of wisdom that you want to, part with?
Be intentional and ask.
Is that on
either side?
Either side.
Okay.
Either side.
Be intentional and ask, and put yourself out. Make yourself a little bit uncomfortable, because it's going to be when you start doing that. But also remember that if you're looking for a mentor, they don't have to be perfect. If you're looking for a mentor, it just needs to be someone that is strong in the Word, someone who is spiritually more mature. And I think Luke said it earlier. It doesn't need to be an age type of thing. It's just someone that you can look up to, someone who is ahead of you in an area.
One thing I've found is every time that I've joined a group or was asked to lead a group, that Satan worked really hard on me. I called Jim the night before Bible study started, trying to find a way to talk myself out of actually teaching the class. So the kind of way I look at things now is the more that my mind keeps saying, nah, you don't need to go. We don't need to do this. I just do it now. It's kind of like the movie Yes Man. I'm not sure if you've ever seen it, Jim Carrey. It's just do it. Worst case scenario is it wasn't the right thing.
So, and then kind of piggyback off of what Jim was saying, and if you're seeking out either a mentor or a mentoree, I mean, I think what some people might get hung up on is that, the longevity of the relationship. There's going to come a point where you outgrow that mentor-mentoree relationship. It's not a bad thing. It's just like every other aspect or every other relationship within your life. It's not going to be the end of the friendship or the end of your relationship with that person altogether. It's just, you might have outgrown that mentor-mentoree relationship. Don't be afraid of that. And, that's when you might go, and find another one,
or you
become that mentor.
You become a mentor.
So don't let that hold you back, or because I can see where some people might think, well, if I pick this mentor, I'm going to be stuck with it. It might be a season, and then you transition to another season and find another mentor, or like you were saying, you transition to that season where you become the mentor. Don't be afraid of stepping out.
And mentoring and being a mentoree can also be a two-way street. Like a mentor can learn from mentoring people.
Mm-hmm. You don't really know what you know until you teach it.
Yes.
That's exactly.
Then you realize what you don't know.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So I think that's a good place to stop. So I thank you guys for joining us. And
Hey, thanks. This was great.
Yeah, thanks for having us.
Would one of you guys like to close us out in prayer?
Sure.
Okay.
Father, we're so thankful for this time to be here and to gather and to learn more about each other and learn more about the church and learn more about what we need to be doing as men of the church. Lord, we just ask that you continue to be in the conversation. You continue to watch over us, guide us, and lead us. Help us to continue with our growth plan, that it is in line with your will, that we execute it the way you would have us execute it, and that it would grow disciples who make disciples, that you would be praised and your name would be glorified. All this we ask in Jesus' name. Amen.
Amen.
Well, thanks, you guys. And thank you for everybody listening, and we'll catch you guys next time.